Welcome back to Beyond Well. I am so delighted to be with Claire Bien, a research associate at the Yale University Program for Recovery and Community Health, mental health advocate and educator and author. Her memoir, Hearing Voices, Living Fully, Living with the Voices in My Head, was published in 2016. Claire kept silent about her experiences, her hospitalizations, and her diagnoses for over 26 years and achieved a modest career as a public and community relations professional and grant writer for nonprofit human services agency. Claire, it's so good to talk with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila.
And I just very briefly want to talk with you about what you put in this Hearing Voices group. Tell me just a little bit about when you first started hearing voices and what the experiences were that you were going through.
I first started hearing voices external to myself in 1983, soon after the suicide of my first cousin, whom I'd helped to bring to the United States as a foreign student. I also had been in a toxic office and was not able, basically walked out of my job. So the guilt and shame that I felt over my cousin's suicide and my anger with myself and also with my former colleagues caused me to question everything about myself. And I began hearing voices, and those voices were mostly gossipy because I was paranoid. I was afraid everyone was talking about me, was angry with me. But with support, I got better. The doctors all told me it wasn't my fault, that she had tried twice in China, unbeknownst to us. But, it is that degree of self-doubt, guilt, and shame that brought on that first period of active voice hearing. I had experiences throughout my life, feeling I had no personality of my own, getting really spaced out, rarely losing time, but there appear to be, as I sort of probe more, I think there were some episodes. So that was the precipitating factor for the first break. But then I got better. I found a professional job, we had friends, so it was good. And then the second time, I now understand myself to be an empath, which means that I experience other people's energies, emotions, and as I said, sometimes I felt growing up that I had no personality of my own because I would end up acting just like somebody else who had a stronger personality and talking just the same. And it was very distressing as a child. I was like, what's wrong with me? And I felt some of my fears probably were based upon the fact that I couldn't make sense of what was going on in group I found myself in. The second time, I don't understand. It seemed to be sort of more in the spiritual realm. Also, Caroline Mountmuzzle Carlton has observed that her first break came when she was 8 years old during the Gulf War. And she felt that she worried about what was going on and really sort of took on the cares of the world in a way that an 8-year-old should not have to.
Yeah.
And I just looked I kept calendars and journals, and my second extended departure from consensual reality was in April. I've forgotten the precise date, but it's in my memoir. But just a few days before the Tiananmen Square massacre. And my mother and middle sister and I had gone to China in 1981, just soon after it opened up to the West. And I had so admired Deng Xiaoping. He seemed to be so progressive. But in the months or year or so more preceding the Tiananmen Square massacre, he seemed to be acting more and more as a strong man. And I was feeling that. And there was something else going on in downtown New Haven when I went to work at the New Haven Downtown Council, which and it was right downtown. And when I got my interview on Friday, January 13th, 1989. And when I went to work and I said, Friday the 13th is my lucky day, because I sort of said, I'm not superstitious, so I would just say Friday the 13th is my lucky day, and I would make that happen.
Yeah.
I walked into the building that first week, not the first day, I heard a voice in my head say, Friday the 13th is not your lucky day, Claire.
Whoa.
And then over in April, just a few days before the Tiananmen Square massacre, I had a voice begin speaking to me, and I was trying to write a newsletter, and I looked up at the wall. I had some of my own photographs on the wall. I said, I would sell my soul to the devil for an easier life. And where'd that come from? And I'd read Faust and The Devil and Dr. Webster, growing up and in college. But I'd always been afraid to go there because of the possibility of God. And what happens when one strikes the devil's bargain? So I said no. And so in the course of the next several months, I was bedeviled, literally. And there were physical manifestations. So I don't know what that was about. There are spiritual understandings of that. I think I was perhaps at another crisis because although I was happy, I had a 3.5-year-old son who is amazing still. So my memoir describes a lot of my experiences, the things that happened to me in fairly graphic detail, because I want people to see me, to read this and then to see me, or to see me and then read it and go, oh my gosh.
I want to remind people of the title of Claire's memoir, Hearing Voices, Living Fully, Living with the Voices in My Head, published in 2016. So talk to me about the path that you took, Claire, from working in communications to deciding that I want to work at this Yale University program for recovery and community health. I mean, it's kind of a leap to say, I want to immerse myself in this field, because for many people it could be too triggering. You want to try to compartmentalize that part of your life with the other more outwardly professional, wonderful thing that's going on in society. So take me through that process.
It would be a lot easier not to be doing this work, because it is triggering, and there is so much stigma associated with mental health challenges, and especially with voice hearing, because of that bottom third that which really is filled with the people that people believe are the stereotypical voice hearing. When I was 21, not quite, I wanted to do something to save the world. I went to law school for a year and dropped out. It was a terrible experience. And then I thought, I'll save the world soul by soul, but I didn't quite cut it, because I was making myself ill in practicum during my counseling program. So because I'm an empath, and I laugh about it. It wasn't funny at all. I was feeling the students, the undergraduate students that I saw in victims' pain. So I did, sort of went the route of working for human services agencies as a writer and grant writer. But when I began, doing the work of mental health advocacy and education, and really became involved with Perch, and I first started volunteering for the Perch Journal, which is an arts and literary magazine, and then, went to the IRCC symposia, and really began, and also gave a talk about the ways in which citizenship really resonates with my understanding of my own recovery. And it's because I never was deprived of the 5 R's in any significant way. And the thing that really helped me, I was depressed, flirted with the idea of suicide starting in my mid to late teens through my 30s. And for as long as I flirted with the idea of suicide, and that was a possibility, I stayed in a dark place. And it was, a lot of it was because desire for suicide was driven by my anger as a member of the model minority. The bizarre opportunity, but the bizarre opportunity of the increased understanding of the degrees to which Asians have been massively discriminated against, harmed within the sort of looking at this and saying, it has given me an opportunity to begin doing more exploration and really trying. My goal is to be as diverse and inclusive as possible. And I'm often held at arm's length by various groups, by the professionals because I'm a person with lived experience, by this activist cat because I'm not quite right, by that activist cat because of my history, my sort of my advocacy history, not my mental health history, by this other group of people, not necessarily a whole camp, but groups of people because I'm Asian, and what on earth can I understand about someone else's experience?
Right.
But I'm a well-intentioned and mostly humble human being who tries to do the right thing, so I might not understand perfectly.
I want you to go back over those 5 R's if you were. Would you remind me about where the 5 R's came from and what it means?
The 5 R's of citizenship came from the work of Dr. Michael Rowe when he was working at Connecticut Mental Health Center as a member of the ACT team, which reached out to homeless people who struggled with mental health challenges and addictions. The 5 R's of citizenship are rights, responsibilities, roles, resources, and relationships, plus a sense of belonging in the communities in which one chooses to be or finds oneself a part.
Talk to me about how COVID has affected you personally and both as an Asian American and what it's done to people within your mental health community. I know that you're still a part of the Hearing Voices network support groups in New Haven. So if you could give me sort of insight into each of those different communities, I'd be grateful.
So COVID, in terms of my personal experience, in terms of a feeling of overall safety, very little, because I have the privilege of being able to work from home, and I do work part-time, a few hours. I have engaged in a lot of Zoom meetings. I also have Zoom social groups, folk singing groups, my writing group. And also I have the privilege of being able to take long walks in the middle of the day and watching the spring burst forth. But it's also surreal because I'm removed to the real work, the work that I really left retired from my previous employer to take on, and, really having that human interaction and some of the other opportunities of engaging in person. So it's challenging. I'm starting to feel the stresses, this disorientation beyond, sort of the feeling like this is a fantasy. In terms of COVID, in terms of the animosity toward Asians, because of all the hate speech, especially in the US, I was feeling the tensions and feeling and becoming increasingly paranoid. I don't know how much of it was the memoir. I don't think so, because in the first year, I was embraced by people, for the most part, at least those that I call friends and who are good acquaintances. But as the hate speech continued, I was feeling more and more stressed, and I began speaking out. I have done a lot of anti-racism and cultural competence/humility work. When I spoke to the ways in which Asians have been discriminated against, I was dismissed. My perceptions and experiences were dismissed as being invalid, even among ostensible allies.
Because you were not the right race? Is that the reason? Yeah.
Yes, and because people don't know history. They don't know, the fact that Asians were not allowed to be citizens in the 19th century, and only in the early 20th century where they do that. But curiously and tragically, as more hate incidents have arisen, and there's been more media and a greater effort to educate people to the fact that, yes, indeed, Asians might be privileged amongst peoples of color in the US, they still face massive discrimination. And so as a result of that, I have felt a greater solidarity. There are still people who go, or who glare at me, and there are moments when I become afraid. I am now afraid to go into communities that I don't know. And that's beyond the possibility of becoming ill physically. It also has given me an opportunity to begin speaking out more about this. And I'm trying to figure out a way to do it. I'm going to be participating in a a conversation, or helping to organize a conversation for the Yale Department of Psychiatry.
One of your missions that you've stated, Claire, is to do what you can to increase understanding and accompany practice that it is the social conditions of our lives that create distress, which left unacknowledged, unaddressed, and unresolved can lead to grievous mental health challenges, and which of course in turn can lead to the array of experiences that are associated with psychosis. But I'm thinking right now that the conditions that people are living under, with huge unemployment and quarantine and racial strife, that every one of us could have the unaddressed, unresolved, and grievous mental health challenges. Do you agree?
I do, absolutely. And the conference for the International Society for Psychological and Social Approaches to Psychosis that I organized last November in New Haven, the theme was psychosis, citizenship, and belonging, forging pathways toward inclusion and healing. And Cindy Marty Hadge was the keynote speaker, and Caroline Mazel Carlton, and I, and two other voice hearers, Barry Floyd and Brittany Quagan, were part of a panel. We had this, I think, showed the Beyond Possible film that the Western Mass Recovery Learning Community produced. Gail Hornstein led the conversation. Caroline was there. Marty and I spoke afterward. I walked out of the conference on Sunday evening. It was a 3-day conference with one of the longtime members who said, we were concerned that, a lot of the longtime members are aging. And so we were concerned about the future for ISPS. And she said, I think the voice hearers may save it. and there are some wonderful people on the executive committee.
I'm fascinated by the work that's being done at the Yale University Program for Recovery and Community Health, because our communities are so sick right now. What would you say if people wanted to support the work, if they wanted to get involved, if they wanted to learn more about what you're doing, Claire?
Well, I'm doing only a tiny, tiny fraction of what the amazing work that's being done. So Dr. Larry Davidson, who is a psychologist and a professor in the Department of Psychiatry, is the founder. He and Dr. Michael Rowe, also a professor, he's a sociologist and founded Citizenship Framework, are the two best people to get in touch with. And it's just Larry Davidson, larry.davidson at yale.edu, and michael.rowe, R-O-W-E, at yale.edu.
And then also your Hearing Voices network, your support groups in New Haven, have you gone online for those? And are they accepting new people to be able to do that?
Absolutely. I co-facilitate a support group in the New Haven community from 2 to 3-ish, 3:15-ish on Monday afternoons. Let's see, we are, both David Watson, my co-facilitator, and I are listed on the Hearing Voices Network USA website, as well as the Connecticut Hearing Voices Network website. We have been offering those on Zoom. That link is not published, but if someone gets in contact with either David or myself, we will send the link. And I also facilitate a resource group at Yale New Haven Psychiatric Hospital. And we've had 2 Zoom meetings, one in April and one in May. And my staff co-facilitator would like to, once she goes back to work, begin doing the Zoom video meetings more often.
Claire's book, her memoir, Hearing Voices, Living Fully, Living with the Voices in My Head, is still available at Amazon and other bookstores. Claire, it's been wonderful to talk with you today. Thank you so much for letting us know about your lived experience and the work that you continue to do.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It's been a pleasure.